by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy.
Let's win there.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAC.
You have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so that's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we're back. How you doing, guys?
Hey, Peter.
Doing good.
Hey, Bill.
How are you?
Good. We should make Bill the big picture and us little guys because he's the star.
Well, can I do that? Let me see. Oop, I can do that now. I can't do that. Here we go. We'll go back to one. I have to get the fire truck. I have to get the fire truck set up for more than one person, I suppose. I guess that's water skiing. Would I be water skiing if I'm behind two boats? Is that the whole thing?
Well, everybody knows Bill. He's an incredible researcher. He specializes kind of in the deep state after World War II, maybe a little bit before as well. But he needs no introduction. The great Bill Taylor. It's great to have you on the show.
Well,
It's great to be here.
But for people who don't know who Bill Taylor is, because there are some people who we have new people who watch the show all the time, George. So Bill runs a website called Deep State News, and
Right.
Is the other Deep State still going, or you all?
Yeah, they're still both going. D State Analytics and D State News, they connect to each other. They're just different.
And what's the URL on those?
That's a good question because I never go into that way.
You have to Google. Yeah, there's a weird hyphen at
D-state-research.com.
Actually, my producer tells me that there was this website built called the Duke Report for people who can't remember those things. And both Deep State News and Deep State Analytics are linked on the Duke Report. So if you go to the Duke Report and click on, all right, here we go. Build a website so people can find things and then forget that you built the website. That's very good. But I've been busy. I launched a book last night, George. I haven't released Reframing Reality yet, but I've been going through this process where I've been taking a bunch of other books and looking at them and then kind of like taking PDFs and turning them into EPUBs while I'm analyzing them. And we talked about it on the last show, and I shipped this book last night. This is a pre-release first draft, and for everybody who's a member of the Duke Report, you got an email with a link to this EPUB. So take a look. It's about 130 pages, and we talked about it on the last show. But I took the book that we shall not name, and I normalized it. I took all of the racial and ethnic epithets out of it, replaced them with kind of generic placeholders, and then ran the whole thing through a GPT engine to bring it up to vernacular. And I think that anybody who takes a look at this will see lots of similarities on things that we talk about on all of these channels. And we've been seeing in the news every day for the last, decade or so. And this is for you. This is for the members. And I've already sent it off to one publisher to see if they want to publish it. And I've got a couple more that on my list, but I've got one person in mind that I think would do a really good job with it. So there it is. I shipped it last night, George. Shipping is a feature, as Bill Gates says.
Peter, this is a command performance that will be remembered in the annals of AI history, because what you've done is you've basically taken a very controversial document that causes split between Semite and anti-Semite, Zionist and anti-Zionist. You've taken that, stripped it away, and shown it for what it is just a method of infiltration and control. And you've republished it, and it's an AI masterpiece, right up there with your AI masterpiece of bringing Mr. Truman back to life with his farewell address. So this is easily another AI Emmy for you. But the beautiful thing about this is now we get the AI Emmy, or maybe not AI, but just research master, Bill Taylor, Kennedy assassination, Gibson Island, all the stuff that you wanted to know, but didn't have Bill Taylor to tell you. We have him here right now.
Well, if you're talking about the book that I think you're talking about, I won't say what it is. The interesting factoid is that Alan Dulles was sent to Istanbul station to determine whether that book was a forgery or if it was real, and he wrote about it in the New York Times. And this is 1921.
Principles of the elders of something.
Protocols.
Right.
But if you read the foreword in the book, you'll see that what's the quote that I made? Because Umberto Eco actually wrote a scathing treatise on how it was a forgery and how it was plagiarized. And the thing that's interesting about it, and Douglas Reed goes on in his book to talk about how that there is no proof in reading the document that it can be attributed to any one particular group, which is why I did what I did. But as I point out in the foreword to the book, plagiarism doesn't mean that it's not true. It's ethically, it means that it's been stolen or lifted or taken from another place, but it doesn't mean that the information in it isn't correct. And so if you remove the purported authors of the document from the document, and you put in placeholders, and then you can just use metadata analysis to kind of read what the people in the document are saying, and then you compare it to the news, then you have to start asking your question, well, if it isn't this one group that has been assigned responsibility for creating this document, then who is it? And that's what, and that was the question that Lord Northcliffe was asking in November, I think, of 1922, when he crossed the border into Switzerland, where Alan Dulles was stationed, I believe, at least during World War II. During World War I and World War II, he was there. I'm not sure if he was there in 1922, but when Northcliffe crossed the border from France into Switzerland, a psychiatrist came onto the train with policemen and declared him insane. And within a few days, he was dead. This guy's basically the Rupert Murdoch of Great Britain. And he had written an article demanding an investigation to find out who actually wrote the document. He wasn't making accusations. He was reading the document and saying, gee whiz, the things in this document kind of match what's going on in current events. Maybe we should find out who wrote it. And for that, he was declared insane. And then he passed away shortly after that. George,
Well,
did you,
go ahead. I got the book, but I didn't have time to read it.
Yeah, it's 130 pages. So
I was just put out a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, on Twitter. We're having sort of a discussion in a Twitter type of way about Ernest Hemingway and his rise to fame, and who provided sort of the jump for him. And not to get into the story too deeply, but there's a line of thought that some of this antagonism towards certain groups was created by sort of a smaller contingent within that group, and not even necessarily a part of that group. The reason why to make a long story short, the reason why I think the Alan Dulles trip to Istanbul station is interesting is because you had a large population, or one of the largest populations of the Donme, were the what they call the Sabbatean crypto Jews, part Sabbatean, but they pose as Muslims. And if you read some of the history about Frank, we're going way back. There's an incredible amount of antagonism between the traditional Jewish sects, which are always looking for the Sabbateans, and the Sabbateans who practice an inverted form of Judaism. And you could, I would say that on a broader thesis, there's a pretty good argument to make that there's this sect within what they say is Judaism is really antagonism between a very small group and the majority, and the small group is always blaming the majority on the on whatever bad happens, and they've been going at it for 400 years.
Indeed.
Indeed.
I mean, one of the things that I kind of saw as an advantage in my doing this is that I did design the online education system for the Shoah Foundation Institute. I designed Eyewitness, which is their online education system. And I also worked as a consultant for the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Rabbi Abraham Cooper, who every time I had a meeting with this guy would burst through the door 10 minutes late and go, "I just got off the phone with the Prime Minister of Israel and Hamas is shooting missiles." And the first time that he did it, I was really impressed, that he'd just gotten off the phone with the Prime Minister. And the second time that he did it, I thought, boy, how many times are they shooting missiles into Israel? And the third time he did it, I thought, this is a gag, man. This is an act. This is his cover story for being 10 minutes late to the meeting. So George, next time you're late, you could just say that you were on the phone with the Prime Minister of something.
I'm sure I probably was, but I tell you the great thing about Bill Taylor. Bill Taylor does this deep dive research where he doesn't accept kind of whatever the common, here's the story of the Kennedy assassination. Oh, here's the story of this, or here's the story of that. Bill dives deep. And when I was working with Bill, gosh, this goes back 6 years now, into the roots of the deep state. We were trying to get to the roots of the deep state. If you don't get that tap root, it just keeps coming back. You just pulling the top off if you're not getting that tap root, right? And he was going to this Office of Security. The deep state and the State Department had this Office of Security, and this guy named Otepka. And I wanted to get the reference into the title because you made a great AI, visual. Look at that. The battle. It's a fake. With all the rubber ducks.
That's all. That was all. Was all I could fake the AI into doing, George. I tried to do what we originally talked about, but it just wouldn't do it.
But the beautiful story here is that Bill Taylor is the guy. We got the international expert right here, right now, who did this deep dive into this Otepka, and they're sort of creating a Potemkin village, and that's why I called it Battleship Otepkin and not Otepka. They're sort of creating this Potemkin village to hide the Alan Dulles and the CIA, to hide their operations from the current president, whether it's Eisenhower or it's Truman or it's Kennedy. And the reason is because they want the stuff. They want the bioagents to take the oil-rich lands of the Middle East. They want the stuff to take the Baku back. They want all the weapons from the national laboratories. So they're commissioning these agents under diplomatic security in this Office of Security. So this really gets into John O'Loughlin and John O'Loughlin's father, and this investigation, this Espionage Act investigation into Otepka. Bobby Kennedy signs on. Dean Rusk, the the Secretary of State to look into this guy, Otepka, because they know something's going on. This is 1961, right after Kennedy gets stabbed in the back at the Bay of Pigs. So the expert, the worldwide expert, the top guy in the world, Bill Taylor, on Otepka is here with us right now.
Well, that you're giving me too much credit for this Otepka thing, and because I've mostly followed the metadata on Otepka as opposed to the actual story, and the bioagent motives aren't exactly clear to me. I know there's also nuclear motives in there, and I'm pretty well versed on the nuclear motives. Also, the connections to the Operation Paperclip, but and if John were here, he could jump in because he could add to the fun. But sort of the interesting thing about the Otepka ordeal, and there's a book called The Ordeal of Otto Otepka, which is on an Internet Archive. It's in PDF. It was what I found interesting was the mention of a single person in the basically Bobby Kennedy's Otepka office. As the book describes, it's there was essentially 4 or 5 lieutenants in the Otepka office from the FBI looking into the allegations that were brought against Otepka, and this book even refers to them as the Boston Mafia, and they were essentially FBI agents. But one in particular is the one who stuck out, or the one I probably looked into the most, and he's difficult to find, is Charles W. Lyons. What made Charles W. Lyons interesting in the whole affair, because I think that the common theme was that Bobby Kennedy was aware of some sort of railroading of Otepka, and that he would be at least partially to blame for this mistrial of justice. But really, if you think about it, that his office was essentially infiltrated, the Kennedy's office was infiltrated. It looks like you could chalk another one up for the Kennedy brothers as having good intentions and not necessarily being aware of the skullduggery that's going on around them, in that it's been infiltrated by all sorts of clowns and CIA types. So Charles W. Lyons, who we're just rereading this book a little bit more, who apparently wrote a report on Otepka, which I've never seen, so it's got to be out there somewhere, or it needs to be FOIA'd. Charles W. Lyons had been in the Federal Bureau of Investigation since I believe 1948 or 49, and he was soon after censored by the Bureau for having a discussion with an ex-Bureau employee named Edward Pierpont Morgan, and
that's a curious name.
Yeah, we'll get to how that works in a second. My theories on that. So Edward Pierpont Morgan he shows up in the Cold War files pretty frequently after this incident. It looks like he's basically recruiting people for the CIA, and this is very soon after the CIA was formed. And it looks like Charles W. Lyons, to make a long story short, was one of his recruits. So essentially, whoever, to the extent that something needs to be done about Otepka from the CIA or Allen Dulles' point of view, he's got his spies right in the office, able to to provide disinformation and get the results that the CIA is looking for, rather than the truth which Bobby Kennedy appeared to be looking for. What's interesting, Edward Pierpont Morgan, the recruiter, his name, you would think, maybe it's Edward Pierpont Morgan. I got 2 theories. I could never find a relationship between Edward Pierpont Morgan and the more famous Morgans, the Pierpont Morgans, even Morgan Stanley is in there, but the J.P. Morgan family. But then I was thinking, you know what? If I was growing up in Kansas in the 1910s or 1890s, and my father had a son, and I wanted him to get a good job, maybe go to college. Why don't we just name him Pierpont Morgan? That'll open a lot of doors, and then we could ask questions. If anybody asks questions, we'll have a good story by the time that happens. And
well, and I just want to add, he worked for Robert Mayhew, who
right.
was the chief financial right-hand man for Howard Hughes, who was the top defense contractor in aviation during World War II. And all of those contracts were being moved to these Nazi paper clippers by Pierpont Morgan and Mayhew. At least Mayhew was moving all these things into the spy plane with the U-2 and all these things. And they're bringing in these Nazis into places like Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they're hiding it from the FBI. And John O'Loughlin's father, Tom O'Loughlin, working counterintelligence, is saying, "Hey, what the hell is going on here? You guys are bringing all these Nazis in." So it's an interesting FBI versus CIA battle.
Yeah, and you were talking earlier about the taproot too. And again, I'm putting my finger in the air and seeing which way the wind is blowing. But if you want to get to the taproot, my thought is that you start to look for connections to people like Harry Hopkins and Bernard Baruch, because those guys are the taproot. Those guys are, very close to being in the controlling position above, all of these agencies.
No, there's a couple like that. I would add Louis Lichtenstein Strauss, Admiral Louis Lichtenstein Strauss, who headed the Atomic Energy Commission for 2 terms for 8 years as chairman. He's one that I run across all the time as being very well connected. But that's I don't want to get
so Louis Lichtenstein. So the Atomic Energy Commission, when Baruch was kind of like moved out of, when Truman came in, I think Baruch kind of moved out of the U.S. government a little bit and moved into the international government and moved into the Atomic Energy Commission for the UN, whatever the UN version of the Atomic Energy Commission, and wrote the founding document for the Atomic Energy Commission for the UN, not unlike Julian Huxley writing the founding document for UNESCO. So Baruch is kind of connected in the atomic energy arc there.
Well, Bill has written a lot about Zalman Shapiro and the initial NUMEC affair to get highly enriched uranium to Israel for the bomb. And there was this Samson option that Seymour Hersh wrote about getting Israel the bomb. And a lot of this initial UN charter stuff and Baruch and all these other Zionists was about ensuring it's okay to write on paper that Israel has these boundaries, right, on a map, but what's the enforcement mechanism when you have hardly any army and you're completely surrounded by 7 Arab nations? And the 2 force multipliers that I put forward, one Hersh wrote about, which was the Samson option, which is the nuclear option, but then the bio option also, I think, is the one that's been underserved. That's the one I say is the real Samson option because it's much more usable, much more practical. But I'll let Bill talk about Zalman Shapiro and the NUMEC affair because this is certainly all intertwined with the survival of Israel, right from the get-go. After World War II and the Manhattan Project, all those people, LP Geist, the grandfather of Jeff Bezos, all of them are involved in this Zionist effort for the survival of Israel.
Just before you get to that, just one sidebar, and this is a throwaway because it's spelled differently. But one of the admirals in charge of the Mediterranean during the USS Liberty event was named Lawrence Geis, but it's not spelled the same way as his grandfather. It's a different spelling. But I thought, that's curious. Anyway, I digress. Sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting because his name LP is Lawrence Preston Geis.
Right, and this guy, and that's G-I-S-E, and the
G-I-S.
admiral, and the admiral, I believe, is G-E-I-S or G-E-I-S-S, Geis, like the German spelling.
Interesting.
Well, those could be like affectations of the word guys, but who knows? Yeah. But I'll let Bill talk about the New Mech affair and Zalman Shapir.
Everything will eventually comes together, but the New Mech is more commonly known as the Apollo affair. Like if you were to type Apollo affair in Wikipedia, they actually do a pretty good job of writing it up. At least it's a relatively substantive article, at least last time I looked. But the Apollo affair involved essentially the pilfering of weapons grade uranium from a New Mech factory in Apollo, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Pittsburgh. So between approximately 1960 and when it was discovered the uranium was missing, this is nuclear bomb grade material. Between 1960 and 1965, about 300 pounds of the stuff went somewhere out the back door. I think in the book, the Irishman, it's maybe hinted at that some of the Teamsters were shipping it out, but the 300 pounds was essentially enough to make 6 nukes. The CIA, I believe, in 1967, 1968, did some testing of an Israeli nuclear test. It might have been in the South Indian Ocean, or at some point they got a hold of the isotopes and they were able to determine pretty definitively that the the nuclear material that was used in the test came from Apollo, Pennsylvania. So there's been a decent amount of written about Apollo, the Apollo affair, New Mech, which was the company that produced everything. I wanted to go back farther because I wanted to know who, how did this New Mech corporation come about? And I've been trying. It's actually the work involved was not that difficult, but the people who seem to the JFK gatekeepers who don't seem to want to talk about nukes or Israel or missing uranium while Kennedy is president. There's a very interesting backstory to the company New Mech. It was essentially
How do you spell that?
NUMEC.
Okay.
And it's an anagram. Is that what I'm looking for? New Mech, Nuclear Material Corporation, I think, is something like that. But it's NUMEC. But what I found, and I had never seen this mentioned anywhere else, and I'm not patting myself on the back here, but maybe a little. New Mech was formed from a company called the Santoy Mining Company, and then also 2 smaller public companies, American Nut and Bolt Company, and a company called Apollo Steel. I believe it was Apollo Steel. Anyway, Apollo Steel brought the property. American Nut and Bolt, I'm not sure what they brought to the table, but the Santoy Mining Company brought the listed, the freely traded listed shares, which means that almost all SEC scrutiny could be avoided by forming this new company out of the ashes of and publicly traded shares of an old company. And that old company, as I mentioned, was Santoy Mining Company. Santoy was actually a pretty decent sized company at one point. It was once all the way back in 1908. It was once part of a huge fraud case involving Charles M. Schwab, the founder of U.S. Steel. It had its mines flooded. It mostly owned mines in Mexico. It had its mines flooded by Pancho Villa. Some employees were killed. But the most interesting thing was that it was essentially a penny stock for the next 50 years between 1915 and 1960. But it was essentially controlled by ASARCO, which is American Smelting Corporation of America. So American Smelting Corporation essentially donated this penny stock company to build this nuclear manufacturing company. And ASARCO is owned by the Rockefellers and the Guggenheims. It's the largest smelting company in the world. And you could argue that it's a Rockefeller-Guggenheim joint venture that contributed, that formed this company that would eventually, send steal the uranium from the U.S. factory floor and send it to Israel.
And my
Okay.
well, my rejoinder to that is Ben Gurion was all about the bomb. He was all about the nuclear bomb. He thought the nuclear bomb would ensure the existence of Israel. He was the one who founded Israel in 48. And he felt like, oh my gosh, if I could have this huge deterrent threat against Cairo or Damascus, they'll never attack me. But that's not a very usable weapon inside of Israel. Israel's the size of New Jersey. And so if you bomb Tel Aviv, it's kind of like, well, you're going to turn Tel Aviv into a wasteland for 2 million years. So they transition. This is where I say the Samson option that Cy Hirsch wrote the book really wasn't very practical. Even by the time 67 war comes around, there are already people talking about biological warfare as sort of a Passover weapon. I realize this isn't a part of your research just yet, but that's why I'm saying that they glommed on to all these bioscientists from the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union collapsed in 91. And Golda Meir, if you remember, went to Russia, and she went to the synagogues in Russia, and she wanted to get Russians out of Russia on the case of Russian Jewry, and they were all just happened to be also bioweapon scientists. She was fighting for their rights, but it just turned out to be that they were bioweapon scientists. So I think there's this shift. This is the case I'm trying to make. But Bill, I'll throw it back over to you because I just wondered what you thought about the shift in the usability of nuclear weapons for the insurance of the state of Israel. Because now we're seeing IDF ex-military analysts saying that there's pandemics right now in South Gaza, causing migration in South Gaza right now.
I would even argue that Israel itself is a throw. Who cares if Israel wants to bomb? I mean, it's a sovereign nation. If they want to bomb, they can have a bomb. And they get it any way they want. We could send our spies to somewhere and steal their stuff. Spies are going to spy. So that's one angle that I think that's an impediment. People can't get across the Israel doing it. Well, could have been anybody who did it. What I think is interesting is who sold it to them here. I mean, it was a sale. The Mossad spy. The Mossad spies took it. Well, Mossad spies are going to spy, but who in the U.S. military and the Atomic Energy Commission and corporate America was looking the other way or facilitating
James Angleton,
and Dulles. Angleton and Dulles working on the behalf of the Rockefellers because the Samson option for them was use Sunnis against the Shiite so that we can pry the two apart so we can get the oil and the gas, and then later the oil and the gas and everything else.
Right. So it was just, I mean, it's an interesting, politically from an Israeli perspective, but like I said, I don't really care at the end of the day what Israel does. I mean, it's a bomb. I guess they could do bad things with it, but it's really the traitors are on the American side, and there's plenty to identify, like Louis Lichtenstein Strauss, who was heading up the AEC when the commercial license was given to NUMEC to manufacture weapons grade uranium, the first commercial license to make weapons grade uranium. Before that, the military did it. LP guys, how did Jeff Bezos get so wealthy? Well, it helps if your grandfather is working as liaison between the Department of Defense and the Atomic Energy Commission, 57, 58, and he's signing the paperwork to make sure that the license goes through. Well, Merson Booth, who we've talked about,
and then he became the director of finance for this startup called ARPA.
Yep, I mean, yeah. and now his grandson is the
wealthiest person to use the technology developed by ARPA.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the context of the official narrative that the media has been talking about for the past 30 years, that this nerdy guy in his garage invents the way to sell books on the internet. Yeah, well, everything at this point you have to look at everything with a jaundiced eye. And that narrative is wrong. Bill Gates' narrative is wrong. Even and this is one of my. We won't get into it here because it's way too deep. Katy Perry, the pop star, her narrative is completely wrong, and it connects to all this as well. So that's why I think you really have to go deep into these to see what the start of this some of the stuff is, and it goes back a long time.
Well, so you guys go deep. I like to go back because George says it's all in the metadata. And the thing that I've become hyper aware of in the research that I've been doing lately is mass population movements. Like you can look at the horror of war. You can look at the horror of World War I. You can look at the horror of World War II. You can look at the horror of the Cold War. Those are the bright, shiny objects that they want you to look at. But if you look at the way that mass populations have been moved around the surface of the planet, like you're playing Risk, or you're playing Monopoly, then that's a different story. When you take the horror out of it and you just look at entire populations of countries being moved from one part of the planet to the other part of the planet, then that's a different story, and that's a different way of looking at it, and that's not a way that gets reported very often. We see all of these people that are coming over the borders. All the Western countries in Europe are being flooded with people from closer to the equator, I would say. And likewise in the United States, people are coming over the southern border. My guess is that there's probably a lot of people coming over the northern border also. But these are population movement programs, and this isn't something that's going to happen. This is something that's happening now. And there are reasons for making things like this happen. And if you look back historically, if you look at the population movements, you can go back farther. You can go back to the French Revolution. You can go back to the American Revolution. Like there were mass. You can look at the potato famine in Ireland. There were these mass events that wound up having huge populations of people pick up and move from one country and then go off to another country. And I think that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at, okay, there's all these people coming over the border. What's next? What's the next thing that they're trying to do? So that's where my focus is.
Well, I think the Gaza migration right now, I mean, isn't it interesting when there was the Irish potato famine, they all ended up on the Erie Canal? They all just landed and they had an immediate job to build the Erie Canal. And when that was done, oh, by the way, Patty, you're a soldier now. We're going to send you to Fredericksburg. And I think the same thing.
Or you can work on the Transcontinental Railroad because we were building that at the same time we were fighting the Civil War.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Transcontinental Railroad is another great example. And because these are national objectives by the power elite, they need the bodies. And therefore, that all of a sudden, ergot, all of a sudden, here's the rod of the potato. All of a sudden, now we have all this Irish labor. The same thing is true for the Western pipelines in Saudi Arabia, taking the oil from across the breadth of Saudi Arabia to this place called Neom or Neom, Neom. We need bodies. We need to bring people down there. All of a sudden, we have a displacement of everybody in Gaza.
Yeah, it's interesting because my favorite podcast, the one that I really only pay attention to while I'm working on my book, is on Sunday evenings. Richard Grove does a mega podcast. Sometimes it's like 8 hours long, but he was talking this last Sunday about how he was incredulous. That was the word that he used about the Ben Gurion Canal, and he was kind of incredulous about the oil that was reported to have been under the leasehold of the Gaza territory there. And I think his incredulousness is gone at this point. Like he's starting to see this whole thing as a real estate play. There's a canal that's got to go through. There's oil that's underneath there. We need to figure out a way to do this, and we need to get those people to move. We need to get them to move someplace else, which is why our thesis about there being some kind of, and why are they targeting hospitals? Again, the metadata is there. Okay. people are arguing about whether or not the hospitals are housing Hamas or not housing Hamas. Forget all that. They're hitting hospitals. Okay. What do hospitals do? Hospitals take care of sick people. Okay. If you're playing Sim City, okay, and all of the hospitals blow up in your Sim City, then disease is going to go up. Like, this is a cover story for blowing up all these hospitals, a cover story for the pestilence that's coming. That's my thesis.
This is not a thesis. It's really happening in South Gaza right now. The Israeli top military people are saying it's happening. So, Bill, I wanted to make sure we plug your book because we're doing a huge disservice. We're just barely
Don't even plug it. I have to put it back on our website. I moved recently, so I don't even know where they are.
Okay, so we'll plug it. We'll plug it the next time you're on.
Give me a like on Twitter or something. Follow me on Twitter.
Why don't you tell everybody because it's like 13888. Why don't you tell everybody your Twitter? Just make sure we.
Well, that's a good question too, because I've only been kicked off of Twitter I think 3 times now, so I'm up to my. I go by Bill Taylor 138888, and
so 4 8s.
4 8s, yeah. But if you start with 138, you'll eventually get it. So Bill Taylor 138888. You don't have to be exact. And actually, the handle on that is at DNews 2022.
I think Peter's bringing up your website.
I am. Yeah. Here we go. Here we go. So Bill.
Yes.
What untoward thing did you do to get yourself banned 3 times?
It was under the old regime at Twitter.
Okay.
And I think it was substantially, or maybe one more time shortly thereafter. I'm not really exactly sure. I make fun of the current governor of New Jersey a lot, but who knows? Who knows what they were doing at that point? I've had this one for a while. It's taken a while to even get to this number. I did buy.
Look, I'm not following you. I need to follow you. Boom.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
The stupid profile pic is. I have a lot of fun on Twitter, I guess you could say. So the New Jersey State Police were looking for that person in the profile picture. So I used his picture, and then
was his name Bill Taylor?
No, who knows? It's just a guy on a motorcycle, and then I taunted the state police, and I actually did get their attention because I had 125 profile visits and no new followers, so they were checking me out.
Well, while we have my Twitter screen up here, I thought I would pimp this plugin that I use for the Brave browser, which is this. It's called, I don't know. Oh, you can't see it. What is the name of this thing? I could share my whole screen and show it to you. Anyway, you can see on the right side that I've eliminated all of the noise from Twitter. Like, it lets you turn off all of the parts on Twitter that you don't want. So I'm just seeing your thing. So there's a plugin for Twitter that you can get that turns everything off, and actually replace my branding. Do you see how I don't have the X in the upper left-hand corner? I still have the little blue bird.
Nice.
I'm old schooling it. George, you might notice that I've changed my lower third on the screen here.
Tell me how you did that.
Jason Goodman reportedly was speaking to one of our fans who says that if we have invited him on the show, it's certainly not because we've ever DM'd him or called him on the telephone, and we both have his telephone number. And he referred to me as your incredibly inept friend. So my lower third is a hat tip to Jason Goodman. And I was thinking, as your incredibly inept friend, that I've probably done a lot more shows with you now than Jason ever did with you.
Oh, easily. And these guys are having a second career. They were both kind of tanking. John Cullen had the good story about flu going down at the same time coronavirus went up. But ever since coronavirus has been over, he's kind of been, like free fall. And this, George literally doing the old Jason George shows from 2017 has brought him back, resuscitated him from near death. And Jason was completely tanking. The only thing he had was Charles Ortel, and he, down. And so now they're really literally rewarming stories we did in 2017, and their ratings are up. So whatever, I mean, it for me, it's just verification every time they play something else. Oh, sure. Here's Julian Assange spokesman in front of the Ecuadorian embassy saying he watches George Webb. How does that hurt me? It's like, okay, I even forgot that even happened. So I think these are very shallow attempts, and they actually end up helping me.
Yeah, and I'm just going to put it back out there, Jason. He claims he doesn't watch the show. So I put this on here just in case he does watch the show. George and I have your phone number. You have our phone number. I know you have my phone number because you called me one day, and then you recorded the phone call, which is illegal in California because there's a 2-party consent rule, and then you put it on the internet, which meant you broke the law, and so the internet service providers like YouTube that understood the law took all of those videos down, but you still kept it up on BitChute or one of those other ones. And then you put like funny clown nose on me, and you like to make fun of me, and you call me you call me names, you go ad hominem. And it's a whatever. You've got our phone number, you can DM us. You want to come on the show, we'll be happy to talk to you.
Well, I don't mean to take away from Bill, our guest, but
I don't either.
I'll just say this, that Jason...
I'm reminiscing.
Jason wanted to be Peter Duke. Jason wishes he had 1/10 of the contacts you had at the very highest levels, where, playing video games every day with Steven Spielberg's kid, and working directly for Richard Branson, and working X-Files, the first days of the X-Files. All the things you've done, Simon Wiesenthal Center, all the things you've done. The reason why you were so successful, Peter, is because you weren't a backbiting, backstabbing asshole, right? People like you.
Well, I'm not sure after this book comes out, I won't be accused of that, though.
But you were extremely talented. But the thing, and Jason is too, the thing that you have that Jason doesn't have is ethics. You didn't stab everybody that you worked with in the back, and you weren't constantly plotting by the water cooler how you could get ahead of the next person and cast some aspersions about somebody else so that you could get 2 cents ahead of somebody else. Because that's how he got drummed out of Hollywood, because he was a backstabbing asshole, right? Just say it. And the reason why you ascended everywhere you went is because you were a part of a team, and you didn't create dissension. You created cooperation and collaboration everywhere you went. And that's why from your photography all the way through all your creative collaborations with the studios and the websites, and into the people who are writers and documentarians. The reason why you're successful is because you're a very talented, nice person. And Jason should just work on those incredibly horrible character flaws that he has, and maybe he could be a Peter Duke too. Right?
Indeed. It's interesting though, George, as you're talking about ethics, and I have a slightly different point of view. I think that certain points I hit a ceiling, and the reason that I hit the ceiling was because I had ethics. And the example that I'll give you is that when I worked at GameWorks, I got into basically a shouting match with the chairman of the board of GameWorks, because he was a major stockholder in a software development company that had developed a game called Redneck Rampage. Now, Redneck Rampage was a fun game, but the conceit of the game was that aliens, much like the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, had come down and landed in a small town in the bayou of Mississippi, and the body snatching aliens had snatched the bodies of all these hillbillies. And so your job to save the planet Earth was to go around with a variety of these kind of hick tools, like a gun that shot circular saw blades that would saw people's heads off when you shot them. That you would go around in this town and you would kill hillbillies. That was the game. Now, I believe in the First Amendment, and I believe that if you want to go buy a game that involves killing hillbillies, that you should be allowed to do that. But I also thought, from a branding standpoint, this guy, that I'm not going to name him, but he was the chairman of the board of GameWorks, and he also was on the board of directors of the Show Foundation Institute, which he may still be to this day. And we had Quake, which was a game in this game system that I was the program director on. And in the game Quake, you've got a bunch of guys who are Marines who have guns and rocket launchers, and they're shooting at each other. But every person that you're shooting at in the game Quake is shooting at you. There's in Redneck Rampage, you're going around with a weapon and you're murdering hillbillies because they're aliens. And I told the chairman that I thought that it was a bad idea to put that game from a branding standpoint for Sega GameWorks, where it was a family fun place, right? And he said, why is that? And I said, well, what if the Body Snatchers, knowing that he was on the board of directors of the Show Foundation, I said, what if the Body Snatchers came down and they landed in a village full of Orthodox Jews? Like, would it be okay to go around with and shoot them with menorahs or something like that? Anytime you pick a group out like that, and then my boss at the time, realizing that the chairman was getting mad at me, the chairman owned stock in this company. The reason he wanted me to put that game into that game system was because he was trying to get his money back for that game. But my boss, trying to be the mediator, came up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, Peter, he goes, I grew up in South Carolina and there really are racists in South Carolina. And so you really shouldn't be defending them so much. And I was like, I can't make this up, right? Can I make this conversation up? At the end of the day, I was told, you put Redneck Rampage into that game system or you're out of here. That's it. And so I said, yes, sir. And I went off and I did it. But I did call them out on their hypocrisy. I was ethical, so there's that.
Well, do we have any questions for Bill, I'm wondering, in our chat?
Let me see. Married for Brain says, do you think that JFK could have gotten shot when Lansdale got Yamashita's gold? The CIA didn't tell Eisenhower, and Nixon, as VP, was supposed to get elected to run the Swiss account for the CIA. This is outside of my pay grade, so I'll let you guys take it.
I'll pass to Bill on this. I know Yamashita. Go ahead.
I'm still going with the nuclear, and I'll add the biological option in there. I think that technology was the JFK did not want the transfer of any of this genocidal type technology to be transferred to other countries, and that's why he was shot.
I would completely agree. It's Samson option, and I think there's two prongs: a bio and a nuke prong. Yeah,
indeed. All right. Kate Gowan said, started your EPUB. I believe I am beginning to see your objection to Eric. Too timid. I wouldn't frame my reaction to Matthew Ehret as an objection. People are allowed to reveal as much of themselves as they want in this medium. And, we all have to make a choice about how much we want to hang out in public and how much we really believe. And there are certain ideas that can really cause you to have a lot of problems, like if you agree or if you think in certain ways. The thing that started to kind of pique my interest about Matt Ehret is that when I got to Principle 20 and Principle 21 in the book that I published, they read exactly like what Lyndon LaRouche and Matt Ehret and Ellen Brown refer to as the American system of economy. And so just to kind of switch gears here for a second, guys, I'm sorry, but the question kind of took me off in another direction. The American system of economy is based on the idea that you have a central bank, but it's not a reserve bank. It's a bank that issues loans on credit to build large national infrastructure projects, much like FDR did during the New Deal, and Xi Jinping is doing right now. And that's called the Hamilton called that, and Kerry, who was the Treasury Secretary for Abraham Lincoln, called that the American system of economy. What's interesting about the protocols / principles is that number 20 and number 21 read exactly like that Lyndon LaRouche, Matt Ehret, Ellen Brown, Kerry, Alexander Hamilton way of thinking. The big caveat is, though, that this is the economy that they want to install after they've taken control of the government. So what they want to do is that in the book, the power elite, what they want to do is they want to bankrupt the world with debt money. Once they've taken complete control of the monetary system, then they want to reset the economy, which is what I'm thinking the Great Reset is, with a credit-based central economy where money is spent into the economy on big infrastructure projects. That document was written in 1905, so it was written, 8 years before the Federal Reserve existed, and it was written 120 years before what we're going through right now. So the fact that all of this stuff was written down in 1905 and these are things that are happening is interesting. The fact that it 20 and 21 completely overlap with the American system of economy, which is a drum that Matthew Ehret beats, which is something that I agree with, by the way, then I think it's interesting. So there's that.
LaRouche is big on that. World Credit Bank, and don't give credits for debt, give credits for building infrastructure.
Right, and the thing again, when I normalize it out, when I take all of the cultural references out, and you just kind of read it for a plan for what it is, there's a lot of overlaps. Almost all of the predictive programming. If you look at people like H.G. Wells or Neil Stephenson or the woman who wrote The Hunger Games, or name any kind of sci-fi, George Orwell, Aldous Huxley. If they were read in with a document similar to that and say, the protocols was dropped on their desk and said, this is what's really happening. These people, it may not be the people who are attributed with the title that are doing it, but this is actually the plan and this is what we're going ahead with. It becomes much easier to write fiction and make stories up. It becomes much easier to write books like The True Believer by Eric Hoffer or The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills, because they kind of have a roadmap that they're going by. They understand, what the plan is, so they know what the metadata is that they need to go looking for. So it's interesting on that level.
Good.
I'm waiting for people to give me feedback. Like, part of the reason that I put it out there is because I want people to go look at it and tell me what they think. So there's that. McDuff says, ciao a tutti. Ciao.
Well, I'm here in West Palm Beach just to get some of the theater reaction. I'm not far from the theater here. I believe they piped in McDuff's performance of La Traviata. I think it was La Traviata. I might be wrong. But I think they piped it in globally into these theaters. And I'm just catching the folks who paid for the platinum ticket, the $1,000 tickets. I'm just catching their reaction right now. So I don't really have any McDuff. I don't even know what character he played. No, La Boheme. I'm sorry. He played the Bohemian. It would be interesting if John would put down the character he played, because we've had all these people here milling about waiting to give their review. and I don't know what character John played in New Jersey when he just ended his command performances up in New Jersey.
All right. Well, if Bill won't pimp his books, then Connie is going to pimp them.
I see. I appreciate it. Thank you, Connie.
Yeah. Deep State Death by Braided Bathrobe Belt, one of the great titles of a book of all time. And Deep State Fake Alien Invasion for Profit and Distraction. Have you read, what's his name? I have it right here. Did I grab it? No. Did you read Hadley Cantrell's book on the Rockefeller funded Princeton radio project on the
no, but I mean I haven't read the book. I'm pretty familiar with that whole genre of and going back to Lichtenstein Strauss Lewis, he ran the Rockefeller Brothers Fund after World War II, and I think out of Princeton. I think that the fund and the foundation were pretty closely linked. That's an interesting. That's another story, and it ties into the nukes as well. I mean, I'll mention the book slightly. One of the things I thought was interesting was at the Apollo affair. One of them so it was discovered in September of '65 that this uranium was missing. In December of '65, the Kecksburg UFO crash occurred 30 miles south of the Apollo affair, and it's famous in song and legend that this flying saucer crashed into the Pennsylvania countryside, and the military came and taped everything off and says, "Get off!" Nobody is allowed within 10 miles. And I always argued that it was basically they were cleaning up the crime scene and using a fake UFO crash as a way to keep the authorities and the state police and looky-loos from getting too close to the evidence.
Was the Rockefeller Fund in Princeton, was that involved with Muller and the specialty metals? They were buying beryllium and barium and for the rods, the specialty metals, the neutron.
I believe it was. Lawrence Rockefeller was the first investor, the first investor in a company called I think it was Nuclear Development Corps, which was made up of all types of atomic energy commission scientists. And you can almost see you have the experts, the scientists, the managers, and then you need the raw materials. So you're getting that from probably from the Mueller brothers. And that's why they're all trusted now, because it's all one big crime family.
And they were leaking these things out so that these other guys could go corner the markets in the raw materials, the mines, and the process manufacturers, the smelters. Mark Rich cornered the uranium market, beryllium, with the Orr brothers.
Zirconium. They were involved. Mark Rich, Robert Mueller Sr., or Robert Mueller II, Bob Mueller's father. They were very involved with trading these rare metals. His partner was Gerard Tugwell. Actually, he lives in a building that I can see from my house, or used to live in a building in Monmouth Beach, New Jersey. And there's a huge effort was being made to make sure you can get all the materials. One of the big throws, I think, and it was getting late, but you see a lot of the JFK gatekeepers mention Freeport sulfur as having something to do with the Kennedy assassination, and the throw is always that they wanted their nickel mines back in Cuba. Well, Canada has more nickel than anybody else on the planet. Nobody needs nickel mines in Cuba, but if you're refining uranium and you need 20 tons of yellow cake sulfur, all right, and you want your books to match, you got to have like a big supplier and a supplier that's going to play ball, so that when the auditors go back and see, look what feedstocks went into this process and what came out, it all has to equal, it all has to foot. That's the accountant in me thinking that what Freeport Sulfur was really doing was moving sulfur around in a way so that the Atomic Energy Commission and nuclear and military inspectors would never figure out. It might just involve changing changing the numbers on a bill of lading or an invoice or on the general ledger in a big company.
Yeah, your mob reference is, I think, is a good way of looking at things. It's like things are always falling off of trucks, right? They're
well, they're all related. They're all Mueller and Bissell are related.
Indeed. All right. JW65 says, isn't the American system just a euphemism for mercantilism? If I knew enough about either, I'd be able to answer the question, but I'm not sure. I don't know if anybody else has something to say.
I think mercantilism is something a little different. It's more of your middleman idea, Peter, which is always get the strategic bottlenecks, and mercantilism is more being the middleman. I don't think
that's more British than
more British, and the American system is invest in the infrastructure, sort of like you were saying, Hoffer, True Believers. We have everything we need to make this city right here. We don't need no stinking British.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Cheryl Reed says, TV drama Devil storyline about 2008 financial crisis, trading manipulation, shorting, etc., and how economies were deliberately targeted. Yes, I am a big, giant fan of Dr. Richard. What's his last name? The book and the movie is called The Princes of Yen. If you go to the video section on the Duke Report, Dr. Richard Warner. He's an economist. He used to be a member of the World Economic Forum. He lives in Japan, and he did a great book and a great movie called The Princes of Yen. And I learned more about the manipulation of markets in 90 minutes watching that movie than I've learned in any other place. So,
and I'll just say, I'm sitting right now within steps of Henry Kravis's rooftop hanging gardens penthouse, where the meeting with Michael Milliken triggered the 2008 crash. All these things are contrived. 1987 crash, all the Michael Milliken crashes, Boesky before that. All these things were right here, West Palm Beach, Kissinger. It's all planned in order to shift assets toward things that we thought were important goals, national goals, to allow people to buy things for pennies on the dollar. Just saying.
Yeah, speaking of Boesky, his nephew used to be a good friend of mine. He was the president of a game development company called IDOS. And Keith Boesky's claim to fame was he kept telling the developers to make Lara Croft's boobs bigger, because he thought that the bigger that Lara Croft's boobs were, the more games he would sell. And that turned out to be a winning formula there.
Usually is.
George, before we go, you asked me to put together some of my latest AI art renders. And so here you go. This is the graphic for today's show that I did. This was another variation on it. You can see. I was trying to make a battleship that looked like a fake battleship. So I tried a couple of different variations, but I had them make it an inflatable battleship. And there's another one. And then I've had this ongoing series of renders that I'm doing of different historical figures done in a classic style. This is Napoleon Bonaparte, looking much like our friend Christian Westbrook. Oh, not Christian Westbrook, Christian from Project Veritas. Anyway, looking like Napoleon here. This is Helen of Troy with Paris, taking a selfie of herself in front of the Trojan horse. This is Botticelli's Venus, taking a picture of herself. This is Aphrodite in the museum.
In the Getty.
And here's this looks like the Getty.
Aga Khan,
Yeah.
the right honorable Aga Khan.
These are older. These are more Attic, kind of ancient Greek. And this is Narcissus looking at his image in a pond in a verdant forest. So there you go.
Well, I told Peter, I said, we need to have an AI corner in every
there's
show.
the AI corner.
The AI corner. Thanks. Well, what a great show. What a great show. What a great way to end the show, Peter.
Yes, indeed. And I don't think I'm going to see you on Thursday because Thursday, I think, is Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and I booked a 6 o'clock with Jesse thinking, well, maybe Peter will want to do a show at 5 o'clock. But if you don't want to, I'll just do the 6 o'clock.
Well, I don't think I will not be here. I'm going to a large family gathering on Thanksgiving, so I won't be here. But on Saturday, we are doing a Zoom call for the members of the Duke Report. And so we'll see all of our members there. And if you are a member, check your email box. I sent it out to a few people last night or this morning. And producer Jessica says, give a thumbs up and subscribe and share. And thanks, Bill, for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me.
I don't know that we
Bill.
talked about Otepka very much, but there it is.
Well, tomorrow night, we have Dave Underdown and John O'Loughlin.
Yep.
And Bill, you're certainly invited, I think, if you want to do a quad, because we're going to talk about it again tomorrow night, 8 o'clock on John O'Loughlin's show, his Rumble channel.
All right. And there's the cover of the book, The 1905 Revolutionary Principles of Conspiracy, an exercise in metadata abstraction. And how does Linda Hall wants to know, how do you become a member? You go to, that's a good question. Well, first we get rid of the graphic here. So if you can make the graphic go away. You can see immediately below me there, it says buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report. If you go to buymeacoffee.com, you can go to thedukereport.com and click on the Buy Me a Coffee button, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report. You can become a member of the Duke Report. You can buy t-shirts if you go to thedukereport.com/shop. And if you want to support George Webb, you can go to georgewebb.substack.com, and you can subscribe to George's Substack. And that's the main way to support George. But you can also go to buymeacoffee.com/GeorgeWebb1, no E. And if you want to send George something, I'd have to move Bill out of the way. There's a P.O. box. And I don't know how to do that when I've got 3 people.
That's okay. That's okay. Next show.
What? It's a banner. Oh, there's a banner.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. There's George's P.O. box. If you want to send George something in the mail, you can send George that something there. So I will see you on Saturdays. I will see members on Saturday. Otherwise, I'll see the rest of you on Sunday. And George and Bill, thanks so much for joining today.
Thank
you guys. Thanks,
All right.
Bill. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye now. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.